Hello and welcome to the Majorly Undecided podcast. I'm your host, Kat Klaus. And in today's episode, I'm excited to bring you a guest who has worked hard to achieve her dream even when some said she couldn't do it. Leticia was raised alongside a dozen foster children and comes from a family that has been dedicated to community service for more than 40 years in Kern County. Following in her parents' footsteps, Leticia has been active in political and social issues, as well as philanthropic efforts from the time she could walk. She's a third-generation Bakersfield resident and attended local public schools, graduating from Highland High School. Leticia went on to earn her bachelor's degree from UC Santa Barbara in Law and Society before journeying to Indiana to fulfill her dream of obtaining a Juris Doctorate. She returned from law school in 2006 and represented indigent clients while volunteering her free time on the boards of directors for Big Brothers Big Sisters Community Service Organization and New Life Recovery Training Center. Her dedication to the practice of law and her service to the community earned her the respect of her peers and their selection of her as the first woman to preside as president of Kern County Bar's Criminal Defense Section. After serving as chair of the Kern County Planning Commission, Leticia later became a consultant for California State Senate Committee on Economic Development and the state permitting process. She's received numerous awards for her partnerships with local businesses, job developers, and community leaders while spearheading some of the county's most innovative economic development and renewable energy development projects. She's Governor Brown's appointed member of the Board of State and Community Corrections and will make history in 2017 by serving as the first Latina president of the Kern State Association of Counties. She's sought after speaking on issues ranging from the nuances of California Environmental Quality Act, alternative energy development, and recipes to the best hard-shell tacos south of the Kern River. She's a frequent guest on local and valley-wide radio and television, and her political career has been reported on by the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and she's been featured on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Her mother was a Vietnam-era Army nurse, and she comes from a family of veterans. In fact, she married one, and it's become her marriage to her husband Fernando that Leticia has become an avid proponent of mental health support for combat veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Above else, she's a mother, a proud parent of 7-year-old Jude and baby Noah. During her interview, Leticia Perez shares advice for students in building quality relationships with mentors, leadership, as well as sharing how to start along the path of running for office. Without much ado, enjoy today's interview with Kern County's 5th District Supervisor, Leticia Perez. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm so excited to hear more about your story. As I mentioned before, we went to the same high school, so I'm very excited to have someone from my alma mater.
Yay! Highland High, Scott's in the house. I love it.
I love it. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from high school all the way to where you are now?
You know, I went to Highland High, I'm class of 95. I had a really wonderful educational experience there at so many exceptional educators who invested into me. I did theater, I played sports, I was a coach, I was captain of the basketball team my junior and senior year. I ran cross country. You know, I was very, very involved and engaged, which I really tell young people a lot to do because it's distracting from, you know, some of the more destructive paths you can take as a young person. So, you know, I was very, very involved, and I'm grateful for that because Highland offered a lot of opportunities for that, and I always felt super included in that process. I did, however, have a very interesting experience my senior year that I like to share with young people because it's compelling, it's true, and it's complicated, which I think life is, right? And human relations are complicated. And I and my best friend from high school were pretty serious students. We did not go to parties. We did not drink. It's hard to believe, but we were kind of we were really plugged in academically, and we really made the most of our high school experience, which is really cool that we had that opportunity. But when we were seniors and we were trying to decide what the next step was, and neither of us had family members that had come from formal education or really understood the process at all, frankly, right? It was, they were outsiders in that, although they greatly desired success and opportunity for their children, they just didn't know the system very well. So we were really relying upon the high school counselors and the academics around us to give us a feel of what was possible, of what we could be, right? We were young, and we thought we could take on the world and be anything, right? That youthful optimism is so special. And I remember being in our counselor's office, both she and the counselor telling us very directly that my friend had the goods and was well suited to go to college, but he did not have the same opinion about me. And he was very blunt about it. He was very honest. And just for the record, both of us, my friend and I, were both Latina, and he was Latino as well. And so it was very striking to me to hear those words from a member of my community, frankly, that I really did not expect to hear. And I don't know what motivated that piece of advice or that opinion that he had. I'm sure he was a good faith player, and for whatever reason thought that I should stay local. He thought my friend should go away to a UC and that I should stay at the community college and sort of work up the opportunity to go away. And that was very painful because I didn't agree with him. I did thought that I had the goods. I certainly wanted the opportunity to prove it. And I went home and really struggled with that. And as I tell young people, I went home that night and spent the evening believing what he had said to me. And in the morning, I woke up literally and I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm going to decide my fate. I'm going to decide the opportunities that I should pursue. And while I can accept the advice of others around me and give it some credence, because I'm sure there was some legitimacy to his position, but certainly I had to decide whether or not that was true about my life, because certainly it could have been true if I had made the decision to not pursue my goals or dreams or listen to that criticism of me and take it to heart. I certainly would have demonstrated my incapacity to go and fulfill those accomplishments. But I really had to decide for myself that I had to choose. And what's funny is when I got to college, I eventually went away. I went to UC Santa Barbara right out of high school. I majored there in law and society. I double minored in history and philosophy, which I love. I think have been great roots for my love of the law and politics. And so I'm so grateful for that. But when I did go away, I discovered very quickly about myself in college that how much I really loved the law. I really loved political action and the ability of regular people, what I call power, people power, excuse me, everyday people that we're seeing right now in the streets, white, black, brown, right? From all corners of this country coming together and demonstrating their people power. It's so beautiful, right? It's so uniquely American. It's so First Amendment expression. It just really excites me. And I discovered in undergrad that there was such thing as being a lawyer and arguing about such things all day, which I love to do apparently, and that there was such a profession for such crazy people. And when I went to my counselor at UC Santa Barbara, I pretty much got the same spiel that I'd gotten in high school, that in reviewing my grades, which frankly I was not an A student. There were classes I got A's in, but I was not an A student. I was more of a B minus student while I was there, and I'm not proud of that, but it was just how it went. And the counselor told me the same thing, essentially, you really don't have the goods for law school. And she was gracious about it, and she was not mean about it. But she probably was trying to help me and tell me that these were serious endeavors, and that, more serious students tend to prosper in those environments. And that's a true statement, largely. But I believed her for a short time, and woke up again and said, these are my decisions, and they're really mine alone, to determine what my life is going to look like and what choices I'm going to pursue and ones I don't. And I remember in college, I used to have this Mark Twain card up on my refrigerator. And it was a quote from Mark Twain. It remains one of my all-time favorites. And it says, 20 years from now, you will regret more the things you didn't do than the ones you did. So sail away from the safe harbor, throw the trade winds to the sails, explore, dream, discover, something along those lines. But the critical piece being, in 20 years, you're going to look back and say, why didn't I, take that risk, go to college, go to law school, become a plumber, go to the trade school, whatever it is, right, that one's heart desires. Understanding that you have to make those choices yourself is so critical. That's a lot of information. Sorry.
No, it's Tekka. My heart hurts that you were told that twice. I don't even know how. I want to I don't want to get violent, but I'm upset. That's frustrating.
Well, it's incredible to think about how powerful those words are for people. And not everybody climbs out of that, situation.
Right.
I was very, very lucky that I had parents who, while they were not formally educated and were not terribly sophisticated, it really made a point of teaching me to read early, to write early, such that when I started preschool in the local Head Start program right here in East Bakersfield, which is essentially free preschool for poor kids, is what that institution is, and thank God for them. But I could read and write, and I could formulate full paragraphs, going into preschool, and my parents absolutely emphasized that was important, learning to reading on a regular basis, and being, academically involved as much as we could. They did prioritize that. So I was lucky that I had that foundation, and not everybody does. So, I'm always cautious. So I like to tell counselors that story because I'm looking back, less emotional about it than I have been through the years, frankly, as I've grappled with my own self-esteem or my own sense of ability to achieve and get others to believe in me. I've thought about those moments, and they have been painful moments. But looking back now, I wonder how well-intended those people really were, and how much they did not realize how damaging those words really can be. And I believe we have to set realistic expectations for ourselves, right? So that we're not perpetually disappointed or heartbroken. But certainly we should inspire young people to dream big, because great leaders, great entrepreneurs, great, administrators of science and medicine. Many, many, many of them have very humble beginnings, and many of our most beloved thinkers, like Mark Twain, right, and many, many others, have very humble roots, and as a result of that, have a connection to humanity that I think is profound and absent in many of the ivory towers, if you will. So, we really have to encourage people to dream big and think big, because if they have the will and they believe it about themselves, they can achieve anything. That's the truth.
I don't know who said it, but there's a saying that, talent only gets you so much, but you can outwork anyone.
Oh, I love that you say that. I love that you say that, because here's what, and you can ask my staff, ask Christian Romo, he'll tell you. My tagline is hard work wins every time. And while it has never been the case ever for me that I've been the most privileged or wealthy or, even super brilliant person, right? I mean, never been a genius mathematician or great at science. But I'll tell you, I have consistently outworked everybody in a room that's around me. And anybody can do that, whether it's cleaning the toilets, right, or going in and debating the hard issues in public, stuff that has the ability to tear this country apart, and to think in ways that are both provocative but also healing for the community, right, that bring us together. Whatever that spectrum is, I'm ready to do it, and I'm ready to outwork everybody in the room, and I can clean toilets like nobody else, and I'm happy to do it any day of the week, because my toilets will be the shiniest toilets, the best looking toilets, that they'll be the ones that people prefer to use, frankly, because you bring that standard, right? You take that standard as a product of your work, your reputation, your stamp is on your work product, and because that's true, you should outwork everybody around you, and if you do, you'll go straight to the top every time.
That's true. That's absolutely true. So for law school, because you went to Indiana to pursue law,
I did.
So tell us about that. So you walk into your advisor's office and they say it can't happen, and then you decide, yes, it's going to happen. So what?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for these opportunities that some policy leaders promote. And I remember at Highland High, getting the opportunity to choose 3 UCs to apply to. There was some waiver for poor kids, right? And having absolutely no clue what I was doing, I literally went down and circled the 3 UCs that just kind of sounded interesting, which of course makes no sense, but that's what I did. And it was UC Santa Barbara, UC Irvine, and UC Davis. And I got rejected from Irvine. I got waitlisted at Davis, and I got into UC Santa Barbara. And that's where I went. It just, Santa Barbara sounded like a nice place. I'm embarrassed to admit that now, but that's really how I made that selection. And I got a scholarship, and it was actually about 40 members of my church who piled into a caravan, about 4 or 5 vehicles, a couple of vans, and drove me over to what for us felt like the edge of the universe, Santa Barbara, California. That was the edge of the universe, having never had anyone ever leave home for college. And I remember how hard it was on my mother specifically. She locked herself in the bedroom and wouldn't come out and would not see me off. And it was just so mixed, right? The excitement of being able to go away and pursuing something that we had always claimed, right, through the generations, that we would pursue full-heartedly. And when the time came, it was hard to say goodbye. So that was just really powerful, because as I look back, I think how much they could have really discouraged me from that. And probably, I would have been very swayed by that, as close as my family was, and as close knit, and how just relatively one horse town we kind of were, proudly, frankly. And makes me emotional every time I talk about it, in a good way, to remember how really precious that moment was, that kind of fork in the road. And I'm so happy that after that, all of my siblings ended up leaving for home. And my father, interestingly enough, who's a chaplain at the county jail right now, good man, he ended up going back at 60 and finishing his BA, because he was a student at Cal State Long Beach for a short period, and had actually, with a group of other students in the late 60s, early 70s, withdrew from Cal State Long Beach in protest of the Vietnam War, and never finished his BA. So at 60, after myself and my siblings, and we sort of started an East Bakersfield revolution with going away to college, my kid sister ended up graduating from UCLA and joined the Army, following in my mother's footsteps, and served our soldiers at Fort Benning, which is really cool. And so, it changed the entire trajectory of our family to open up our world in that way. And when I look back and think about the most pivotal moments of my life, certainly, packing my things up. I remember knocking on my mother's door to say goodbye, and she didn't answer. And I packed up my things, all my raggedy bags. Nothing matched, of course. We didn't even know what luggage was. Right? And, all my mismatched bags, and drugged, and of course, drove to the edge of the universe, 2.5 hours away, to pursue a dream of an education, right? And expanding our family and expanding our understanding of the world. And it absolutely, absolutely is life changing. So I like to tell young people, in particular, young people from poor and humble families, that they have the opportunity to completely change the trajectory of the entire direction of their family, their younger siblings, their family, their neighbors, their friends, to go and show that it can be done, and to succeed in that, right? To not just attempt it, but finish it, and bring that glory, that honor back to your community. Take a victory lap in your old neighborhood, right? And tell others, there's a place for you too. It's very meaningful, and I've had the privilege of doing that with my own family, and gosh, I sure am grateful, to be an American.
That is incredible, because there is a lot of pressure, and especially venturing out as the first one. There's not only the uncertainty of college in general. As a teenager, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You're moving to a new town. You don't know anybody. You don't know what to expect. And then that uncertainty of leaving the family, and those mixed emotions of being the first in your community and in your family to go and make that venture. And then the pressure while you're in school as well to be that ideal
Right. It's interesting. I really think that we are a product of our expectations, right? We really rise to a standard that people believe that we are, and what we convince ourselves we are, or our limitations are. It is so powerful what we believe about ourselves, and the opportunity to demonstrate through action what is possible, especially when it's not supposed to happen, right? When your life trajectory, if you look at all other social index realities, you see that a lot of people that come from Kern County don't get those kind of opportunities, and that's white, black, or brown. That's across the board. We have some real challenges with educational attainment, with literacy. Those have to be communal efforts for us to raise each other up, right? As a rising tide lifts all boats, and we shouldn't leave anybody behind. Especially people willing to work hard. So it's incredible what can happen when a mind shifts towards what's possible. And it is most real when we see it in others who look like us, who have similar challenges, and we go, wow, I can do it too. And that moment is that's magic. That's where the magic is, when you go, wow, that could be for me too. And I love that. I think there's real magic in that, and there's real humanity in that, right? When we lift each other up. And so I've been very lucky to be in consistent positions to be able to do that for others, because that's where happiness is. That's where it lies for me as a person seeking as much happiness as I can on this earth. I have found a magic bullet, if you will. I'm lucky.
So tell us a little bit more about how you got into what you're doing now. You're the supervisor for the 5th District. I'm sad that, not that our supervisor isn't great, but I think I missed you by like 2 blocks boundary-wise.
Oh, wow.
So tell us a little bit about, how did you decide, this is what you wanted to do? You loved law, and you went to law school, but then how did you get on this path? Were there opportunities to manage of? What did you do?
Oh, it's such a great question. So while I was at UC Santa Barbara, I had the privilege of externing in a NPR radio station, and the program was called Dialogues. And it was run by a really rather locally in the community, kind of a famous judge who was, became a judge. At the time, he was a criminal defense attorney from UCLA, had a very, very successful practice, was very wealthy and influential. And as I discovered, he was married to the state assemblywoman. And I didn't know that when I met him and started externing on the radio show called Dialogues. And it was this cutting edge issues like we're seeing today would be, it's like the Richard Bean show, right? That I'll be on later today at 2 with my sheriff, Donnie Youngblood, talking about these very provocative and interesting times, which I think create a lot of opportunity. So I've always liked that kind of cutting edge discussion and society politics, right? My major is law and society. And I love those big issues about our social contract with each other, right? And American democracy, what does it look like, and how do we protect it, defend it, through life's, remarkable changes. And so I found out that his wife was a assemblywoman. And through a friend's prompting, it wasn't even my own intuition, it was a friend's prompting, said, you ought to ask him to introduce you to the campaign. You can do voter registration or learn about politics. You would really, like that. This was my last semester of undergrad. So I had not been involved politically while I was at UC Santa Barbara. I really didn't know how. I just didn't know the institutions yet. And so I expressed my interest in that. And he said, well, why don't you come on board and register voters for my wife's election? This was like the summer, and her election was in November. So it was a short time frame. But I walked on, cold walked into the campaign office, met a gentleman who would become one of my most important mentors and friends ever for 2 decades. He currently sits on the Board of Supervisors in Santa Barbara. Doss Williams, close personal friend, like a brother. He became my mentor and introduced me to the world of politics, and has mentored me for 2 decades. But he got me on to voter registration, made $10 an hour, and frankly out-registered everybody on the entire crew. There were 20 people on the crew. all of them kind of soldiers of the Democratic Party, if you will. And I was not really a partisan person, although I was a Democrat at 18 and had been a lifelong Democrat. I wasn't really rooted in the partisan institutions. So I was really kind of an outsider. But again, I outworked everybody around me and used my natural sales ability, to be in the top 2 of the 20 voter registration people. So when the voter registration period ended, they brought on the top 2, me and a guy named Tim, and we became actual organizers on the campaign. And that, of course, changed my life. I walked precincts. I got to know the community. I started understanding political data and the science behind winning, right? And what it takes to make democracy for, outsiders to participate, if you will. And I've been honing those skills for 2 decades. And so it's really remarkable, those serendipitous moments, those happenstance moments where you say yes. Well, another thing I always tell Christian in my office is the answer is always yes, right? Will you come volunteer? Will you show up early? Will you stay late? And I always tell him, in my 20s, I was basically unpaid staff to every cause and movement, that I could get myself involved in. I didn't really make money doing it, but the experience and mentorship was absolutely invaluable. And those things change your life. And I tell young people so often, define good mentors. Reach out to people who clearly know more than you do, have been involved in whatever they're doing for a longer period of time, so they just naturally know the ropes better and can teach you so much. I've been so lucky that I have had so many mentors, and they are not just people from my community. I like to brag, and I feel very proud of the fact that the majority of my mentors have been conservative men, in banking institutions, and even now, Mike Turnipseed of the Taxpayers Association. I can go on and on. My mentor at the Public Defender's Office, another conservative male, who really saw something in me that they thought was worth shaping, and made time to show me a world that was not my own, and ideas that I had not heard of before, and different ways to see the world, and different ways to skin a cat, if you will, and incorporating them into, the larger kind of humanitarian efforts at decency and equality and justice that you care so much about. They've really added layers on that I had just never been exposed to before, and I'm so lucky. I am so lucky that I've had that exposure. And I do think it's kind of a secret to a lot of my success is my mentorship relationships, my openness to people who disagree with me or would like me to think of things just a little differently, or incorporate another layer of analysis in order to create more sustainable policies that have more buy-in, right, as a result of being more inclusive, and are sustainable, and have the potential for real transformation in this community that we love so much.
When did you
I don't even know if I'm answering your questions.
You
I'm
are.
not even
No,
sure
it's great.
I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm sorry.
You're just sharing your story. You have so much good advice. I'm really curious. How did you decide to run for supervisor? And I think that, was it, because we don't hear this side, was it scary? Did you know exactly what was going to happen? What did that decision look like? And then what was that journey? Because I know there's a lot of students who, they want to help their communities. They want to, develop this passion for taking action, who later will probably run. And I know, just thinking about running for an office sounds terrifying.
Yeah, right.
So can you share a little bit about that decision and
Absolutely. So, it's kind of funny. When I was in, do you know Anna Lavin by any chance?
No, I don't.
Okay. So she's a progressive person in the community. It does a lot of good activism. Well, I went to high school, and she used to work on my staff, actually. But her younger brother and I were debate partners at Highland High. And his name's Wim. He was just a year younger than Anna and us, and I think he just finished his PhD, and he's a very bright young man, and stays connected in the Kern County politics. And we had a class together it's a debate class. It's slipping my mind the name of it. It was a really just excellent learning opportunity. But we were partners there, and I remember distinctly that my favorite topic in high school was serial killers, strangely enough. And so I had read all these serial killer books in high school, and I did my senior thesis on Jeff Dahmer. I mean, the whole nine, right? Even now, I could tell you anything you would ever want to know about serial killers. You come to me, girlfriend. Okay, I got you covered. But I really wanted to go to the FBI. And I wanted to chase serial killers. And I had been really turned on by that idea with The Silence of the Lambs, right? Which came out when I was about in junior high. I'm really dating myself here. But I was so fascinated by the idea of this powerful woman with a gun, right? You know, upholding law and order. And, you know, my parents were ministers, and we were raised very conservatively, frankly. Not so much politically, ideologically, but our personal lives were very conservative. And you know, the maintenance of that, the desire to protect our community was, you know, was really so powerful. And in my cork board in my freshman dorm at UCSB, I had a pamphlet pinned onto the wall there that said, you know, "Are you ready for the FBI?" or something like that, that I would see every day. And it's funny because as I began to learn about our own jurisprudence and start to read Supreme Court cases in undergrad, oh boy, did my world just explode. And I discovered through that process that I had a lot in common with people who really were looking to expand constitutional rights, right? Really develop their application. The concepts of, you know, due process, concepts of equality under the law were just so compelling to me. It grabbed my heart, and it's never let go, truthfully. But I really was hell bent on law school because I thought that would be the route I would go to the FBI. And, you know, I just had this thing in my head that I had to go to law school and I had to get a real profession in order to be taken serious by the FBI, as funny as that may sound now. And and I discovered my real love of the academic side of our institutions politically that have guided us and have failed sometimes and have done magnanimous things, right, as Americans. And we have those. That's the human history of human evolution, you know, and it's always been this way. So who's there and who's pushing, and whether or not people recognize their power to influence political institutions really matters, right? We don't history is not on some definable or predictable linear progression, right? It is defined by the people who are there. It's defined by who's on the Supreme Court, about, you know, who gets a voice. And so the individual is so powerful. So I really was confident that practicing law was going to be what I was ultimately going to do, either through prosecution or investigation, or, you know, whatever the FBI was going to have me do. And it wasn't until I really took the full leap into actually going to law school that I discovered just how much I saw myself more on the policy side. I saw myself more on the sort of defend the underdog, right? That my American spirit and the spirit of the Bill of Rights, the spirit of the Constitution, was one that required me to be a little more provocative and a little more outside of those traditional institutions. Heck, the FBI may not have ever wanted me anyway, right? What do I know? But certainly, I became a public defender out of law school, with the sincere and honest belief that I would get in there and shake that place up and bring all these great nonprofits and job opportunities and close the skills gap. And, you know, I was going to transform that institution, make it something it had never been. And after 3 years, the number one question I ever was asked by a client, "Miss Perez, can you help me get a job?" And the truth is that overwhelmingly I could not. And the truth is 9 times out of 10, I was looking at usually a male, usually uneducated, usually without a high school diploma or a skill set, with hygiene challenges and personal skills challenges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, soft skills, the whole nine, you name it. And of course, criminal record, you know, which is a real problem, right, for gainful employment and upward mobility. So I left there pretty heavy-hearted, with the sense that I was, as we would call, many of us cynical public defenders, would call the work we were doing window dressing, which is really kind of tragically not funny at all, right? The idea that we have all of this taxpayer investment, all of this human capital invested into an institution that, is dealing with people that are otherwise unemployable and hopeless and frankly, living in an antisocial paradigm. And it's, bad for everybody. It's all bad. It's all, however you cut it, it's all bad. So I had had the privilege of joining the Planning Commission while I was a public defender, and that really changed everything because I came under the tutelage of our planning director, Lorelei Oviatt, who has mentored me for 10 years now, and she is utterly brilliant. 4 governors she has advised, including Governor Brown, who I really love and admire, who had Lorelei on speed dial. She teaches a class at Cal State Bakersfield, by the way, and I highly recommend it. You should promote it because she really is the most effective public servant in the state of California. In my opinion, she's why we lead, the country in renewable energy, and in a red county and a otherwise oil and gas county. We have these other remarkable energy portfolios because of that kind of ingenuity. So it really whoa, talk about opening up your world to policy, to energy portfolio and creation and all the pieces of the economy and employment rates and skill set, and all the pieces started coming together in a much more streamlined way to help me understand all the pieces I was missing at the public defender's office, right? I had the passion, the love, the fervor. I had wonderful people there. They're still amazing, giants of the Constitution who are there today, who have my utmost love and respect, for defense of our most precious liberties. And so I have been able, through the policy side, through new mentorship, through new opportunities in policy, to learn the bigger picture, right? Politics, its ills and opportunities, right? The people who see the world differently than I do, that can really teach me how to do better the things that I love to do. And so as I became a planning commissioner and as I closed out my time at the public defender's office, it was clear to me that I needed to be in an environment that I could affect more of the policy issues. So as I left the public defender's office and I got my feel of land use policy, environmental quality, the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, incredibly provocative, fascinating stuff. It became clear to me that politics was still my passion. It was still the thing that I thought about the most, obsessed about the most, the words of justices that have shaped and guided American culture at such critical junctures. That really, it's just so good. Yeah, it's just so juicy. It's so tasty. I can't get enough of it, And of course, it's fun, right? And because I believe in people power and the ability to change things quickly, or rather have a big impact and use that transition as an opportunity to really transform institutions and the community. I've been so lucky to find myself in positions of influence and power in real important moments. Right now is a very important moment. We are looking at issues of race. I think white people are looking at issues of race in a way that I have not seen before. And I'm beside myself, my white brothers and sisters who are stepping up and having an honest discourse about failures that we have had as a society and how we work together to fix them, right? We don't have to drone on about them and beat each other up about them, but we certainly have to acknowledge them. And I think that, that comes from the dominant population in this country that happens to control most of the institutions, right? That's just the way it is. And those things change over time. My husband always likes to remind me that in 100 years, we're all going to look like Keanu Reeves, right? So as our society changes, right, it's our ideals and our values that Americans that we have to stick to and that we got to, remember and have embedded in our hearts and our minds, because those things will stand the test of time with demographic shifts people come into power, various parties go back and forth. I'm not a huge believer in the party system myself. I understand its role, but certainly I think we can do better than what that system has taught us it does with human beings.
Tell us a little bit.
Oh, you asked more specifically about the process of running. It's funny. I met my political mentor, Michael Rubio. It was former senator, a couple of months after my mother died unexpectedly. She was 57. She was young. And it was a real major blow to the family. So we had put at my dad's church a backpack giveaway in her honor. My mother was a Sunday school teacher, and she was just the most incredible arts and crafts person that you could ever meet. And she'd collect all these things around the house and create this art with the children that was just so special. And when she died, thousands of people came to her funeral, literally 4,000 or 5,000 people, and it was a week-long celebration of her. It was really a major blow. So we did something at the church, and Michael Rubio participated. He attended as the supervisor for that area. We reached out, and he was gracious enough to go to the church. And while we were there, he and I connected. And he learned I was an attorney at the public defender's office. And of course, I wasn't very involved politically, so he didn't know me through the traditional structure. But certainly he could see this young, Latina whose father's a minister in the community and have been here for decades. So, his political eye kicked in, and he immediately asked me, would you be interested in serving on the planning commission? And I said, what's a planning commission? Of course, I had no clue, what these institutions were, and, what is a planning commission? I literally had to go home and Google it and figure out, what is this? What do they do? But because I was a lawyer, because I was educated, because I was from the community, he felt confident that I could, step up. And of course, he wanted to see how I would perform as a political actor. And I am so grateful, because I would not be here today without it, without that opportunity. And so I like to tell people who are interested in politics and interested in becoming powerful, being influential in the world around them, is, this is important, right? We want good people in power. That you've got to seek out these bodies, these institutions, these commissions, and get your feet wet. Get on a board, ask a supervisor to appoint you. You can go into a supervisor's office, you can go into my office and ask for a list of the commissions and boards that are open, and ask to sit on one. There's Human Relations Commission, there's the Animal Welfare Commission. I mean, there's everything under the sun there that a person can participate in and start to get their feet wet without having to jump right in and run for some big office, to see your name in lights, or just to get quickly in over your head before you know what you're doing. So I'm lucky that I had 3 years on the Planning Commission under the tutelage of Michael Rubio, Al Wagner, a stalwart, just an incredible, beloved Democrat from this community, who is very, very respected across the aisle, and, really embedded in Kern County culture and taught me so much. I sat under their tutelage for 3 years, and they watched me and guided me and criticized me when they needed to, and gave me direction, right? Because I had just so much to learn. So after that, I then joined the staff of Michael Rubio and began the constituent service side, and started learning what it means to meet people's needs, right? And he would always tell me, look, people think they're interested in that big partisan bickering. The truth is, when you go door to door, people want to know about their lights. They want to know about their curbs and gutters. In local government, right, we can really win by focusing on those things that improve the built environment, right, that draw us neighborly together. And in that spirit, when I became supervisor, we launched the spay and neuter program out of my office. And we held 5 spay and neuter clinics 5 months in a row. Thousands of people came out. We got our euthanasia numbers under control, and we're actually set to be a no-kill this year under my chairmanship. That kind of practical, constituent-oriented service that builds community, that cuts across ideological lines that divide us, and unites us around a small common cause that we can feel really good about. I love that about local government. It's nonpartisan capacity to build community. I think we're toast without such things. So with that said, it was a lengthy process. A lot of people think, I just sort of showed up as a rock star and got my name in lights, because that's how it looks, right? That's the story the media wants to sell. And frankly, that's the story I'm selling on Facebook too, right? Because it sells and people like it. But the truth is tons and tons of hard work, tons of reading the documents, showing up to hearings, listening to combating constituents, and finding some middle ground between them, so projects can move forward and people can work and economic investment can be had, so that a rising tide, lifts us all together, in a steady stream of upward mobility. Even when, we don't have the same as each other in terms of possessions, we can certainly be moving on an upward trajectory together. And those opportunities at local government, those commissions, that development of expertise teaches you how to tweak projects, teaches you how to listen to constituents, and change things ever so slightly to make people know you're listening, you care. Their curb and gutter issue is important. It's not a small thing. The stray dogs that keep kids from walking to school safely, that is not a small deal in our rural parts of this county, right? Where curb and gutter is cost prohibitive, frankly, in many regards. So in this business, you should be credible. You should know your stuff. And if you're a marginalized person, which all women are, as you know, we share that. If you're a working mom, which we know creates all kinds of complexities, right? If you're an underdog in any way, then you don't know this stuff. And it's okay. It's okay, because you'll find when you get to those institutions, a whole lot of mediocre people have been promoted through the ranks, and you can outwork them real fast, and you can shine, right? With healthy competition, you can demonstrate that work ethic still has a place in the American creed, and it is what's going to get you the farthest. When you put your head down and shine those toilets, because they need to be cleaned, and it's not beneath me. I'll tell you that.
Last question. What advice do you have for high school students and college students who are a little, maybe lost or not sure what they want to do, or are interested in, being part of the community and helping make change?
Well, you have to be stable to make a real contribution in a great and magnanimous way. And to be stable means to be educated and to be well positioned to compete, right? Because the truth is that look no farther than the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, as demonstrated in Star Wars, to know that there is a dark side, that human greed, that human selfishness are parts of this experience that we have in life, and they aren't going away. And I like the analogy of the stormtroopers in Star Wars, because there's just so many of them, right? There's just so many. You're never really gonna take them all out. They're just keep reproducing. And so that's a part of life that you're going to have to grapple with. And if you care about your neighbors, and I hope that you do, if you make room and space in your life for other people, and you want to listen and compromise, there will be people who fight you on that, because almost every decision that is made on the Board of Supervisors has tied to it somebody's money. Somebody's making or losing money. And that's serious stuff. You're going to get in the way of people's money by trying to make things more equitable or including more people into the pie. You ruffle a few feathers when you do that. And so, if that's what you're going to do, right, you want to take the hero's journey, you want to make your time on this earth matter, you want to leave a legacy that, leaves your family proud, right, that affords you, a funeral that you can be proud of, right? Then you're going to have hard times. You're going to face people who simply don't want to see change, or afraid of change, or change represents things that are fearful. And I try to remember that we can do a lot, right, to close the gap on fear and to demonstrate that we really share in so much. But know that the amount of people who are willing to stand up for that, and who, for whatever reason, have the courage and wherewithal to do so, is a small number. And we have always seen that, generationally speaking. It is a small number. And those people require a lot of support around them, and different people play different roles, right? Not everybody can be the figurehead. But I think if you really are wanting to be creative in the application of justice and decency, then you should be credible. You should be achieve your education or skill set, whatever it is you're going to be, so that you can pay your own bills, or you're not relying on other people, because you should stand independently, and take care of yourself so that you're in a position to help others. So many people spread themselves so thin and don't engage in self-care and don't prepare themselves to compete against what are incredibly dark forces in the universe. It's just the truth. But light conquers dark. Love is the most powerful force. It is the most powerful force, and when we engage in acts of love and we prepare ourselves to compete, and we're competent, we can win. I think my life has demonstrated that. I'm not a saint. I make incredible mistakes, and I have to own them like the rest of us. But certainly we can win when we fight, and we do so when we're credible, we're open to sustainable change, and that includes everyone. And as Governor Brown used to tell me, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, right? We got to compromise to get there, and that means being open and admitting when we're wrong and being willing to make change when necessary. So thank you for the opportunity to be heard. Appreciate you, and look forward to the next time.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview. I want to thank Leticia for sharing all of her wisdom, advice, and her unique story. If you have a question or a career path you'd like to see featured on the podcast, don't hesitate to email us at info@majorlyundecided.com. You can also follow us on Facebook with our Facebook and Instagram page, Majorly Undecided. And as always, you can find more resources, including our free quick guide to deciding your major, on our new and improved website, majorlyundecided.com. Thank you again, and we'll see you on the next episode.